Well, yes, because we know some of them are in place names, of course. For example, near where I live in the Scard, there's a place called Bodgara, which seems to come from the names Bos and Garan, which means the place of the crane. And then the crane comes up again in Cwsgarn, or Cws Garan, the wood of the crane.
Yes, it's interesting about cranes, isn't it? Because they're not native in Cornwall nowadays, although there seem to be some old records of cranes having
right.
lived.
Yes, yeah. Well, going on, another bird which obviously is very common in Cornwall still today is the crow, Bran. And in Dulo parish is a place called Bod Brain, or perhaps as we'd say now, Bos Bran, the place of the crow. And Bran was a name used in Celtic stories and mythology as a person's name as well.
Now, crows are black, and you'd think that maybe they would be called blackbirds or something like that. What about descriptive names for birds in Cornish?
Well, indeed, there are some which do have colours in their name. You mentioned the word black, du in Cornish. The Cornish for a thrush is moch. Then its close relative, the blackbird, is distinguished by being not a moch, but a moch dhu, or if you like, a black thrush. Our little friendly robin is a rudek, ruth meaning red. So I suppose the robin's name in Cornish means reddy or reddish, rudek. And then one of the names for the yellowhammer is pen melon, or yellowhead.
Are there descriptive names that are not necessarily colours?
Well, one I always like is the word for a blue tit, which is pen pally, which means literally a velvet head.
And I believe that was used in dialect, at least up until the 1920s.
A bit before my time, but there we go. We've got also birds described by some physical characteristic. For example, gelvenek means a curlew, which literally means beaky, because it's got a long curved beak, obviously. And then there's another group who are distinguished perhaps by the sound they make, one being the chaffinch, which in Cornish is tink, which is the sort of noise it makes. And another one, interestingly, is the word for woodpecker is kazek kuz, which literally means a wood mare. Mare is in the sense of horse, because it makes a sort of winnowing sound rather like a horse.
What about the descriptions of what birds do?
Yes, Cornish for a hen is yar, and a moorhen in Cornish is a hen that splashes about, a lagyar. And then a gannet, because it dives like an arrow into the sea to catch its fish, is called a sethor. And perhaps the most famous to all of course, of Cornish birds, the chough, in Cornish is palores, which literally means a digger. This is alluding to the fact that it scratches around with its beak looking for insects and so on.
There must be lots of names for seabirds.
Yes, of course there are, and many of these incorporate the word moor, sea, M-O-R, in their name. For example, we have the sea crow, morvran, which is the Cornish for a cormorant. We have moor wolf, literally a sea goose, which is the barnacle goose. And then moor wenol. Gwenol is the word for a swallow, and so a sea swallow is the Cornish for a tern.